thanks for watching. Today's video is going to be a foundation slash face routine for getting very glowy, luminous, dewy looking skin. And this is optimized for drier skin types or people who suffer with very textured, rough skin, acne, scarring, pigmentation, anything like that. In this video, I'm also going to be giving you guys a quick little review slash demo of the Estee Lauder new Double Wear To Go makeup. This just launched recently. It is a beautiful foundation. It's very luminous, very radiant, and finally a double wear for us drier skin types. So if you'd like to see how this applies on the skin, the best ways to work with it, or if you'd like to maybe learn some tips and tricks for creating a radiant kind of luminous complexion on drier skin types, all that sort of stuff, definitely keep watching. These are tricks that I have kind of accumulated from my time working in the makeup industry, working on clients, and also working with my own very frustrating skin. If you are more oily, this might not work the best for you, but you could always substitute the foundation and primer for more of a mattifying finish, because the ones that I will be using are very luminous and very nourishing. As always, I will include a full list of what's on my face in a blog post, which I will link below. So without further ado, let's jump right in. One of the most important steps of your foundation routine is skincare. Ensuring that your skin is properly cleansed and hydrated beforehand will make a huge difference in your foundation application. After I have cleaned my skin, I usually always go in with a hydrating serum. The one that I'm using right now is by the brand SkinCeuticals, and it is the Hydrating B5 Gel. So far, I think I really like it. It leaves my skin feeling so smooth and so hydrated. After a serum, I like to follow with a moisturizer. So my skin is very dehydrated, very sensitive, and very reactive. I am acne prone, I am dry, I have eczema. Basically, my skin just sucks. It's just crap. My current favorite moisturizer for very dry or very sensitive skin is by La Roche-Posay. This is the Toleriane Ultra. This particular moisturizer I've been using for about 6 months now, and so far I just haven't found anything that really calms down my irritation or redness or really hydrates like this one does. So it is a moisturizer, but further than that, it is also a soothing treatment. Whenever I get an eczema breakout, I will usually put some of this on and it helps calm it down overnight. If you have eczema, rosacea, or very dry, sensitive skin, I completely recommend this. I would usually always get dry patches right around my cheeks, but since incorporating these steps into my skincare routine, those have pretty much gone away. After your skin is hydrated and prepped, you can go on to primer. Primer is definitely optional, and it's a very controversial subject. Some people love primer, some people hate primer. However, if you do have very dry, flaky, or textured skin, you do have to be careful because some primers can actually accentuate that texture. And since a primer helps things bind to the skin, sometimes what that does is it causes your foundation to stick to any bump, ridge, or dry patch that you have. The main primer that I do really love right now is by Makeup Forever, and it is the Step 1 Equalizer. This is the Nourishing Primer, and I love the texture of this particular one because it's a very hydrating, almost like a cream-like texture. So even if you do have very dry or textured skin, it helps smooth it and hydrate the skin further. Now, I'm Arabic, so I naturally have a lot of hair. It happens. I get a lot of fine hair along my cheeks, and even if it's not visible to the eye, sometimes with primer I find it really makes makeup grab onto that, and I don't particularly feel like looking like a werewolf, so sometimes I avoid putting primer in this area here, and I just concentrate it on the areas that need a little extra help. So for me, those areas would be my T-zone. On my cheeks particularly, this primer helps kind of smooth it out, give it a little added hydration. For a very glowy or dewy look, you can also use an illuminating primer. Shiseido has one, Becca has a really nice one. However, keep in mind if you are like me and you have a lot of acne scarring or texture, putting a very, very illuminating primer can accentuate those imperfections a little bit. And then I'm just going to smooth it into my cheeks smoothing downwards as well as on my forehead. An extra step that I personally like to take is using a glowy or hydrating spray. This is completely optional. You don't have to do this. I just personally find it gives me a little bit of extra moisture underneath my makeup and helps the glow show through a little bit without looking like a shiny disco ball. The particular one that I'm going to use today is the Tatcha Luminous Dewy Skin Mist. I did talk about this in my fall makeup haul, I believe it was. So I just like to shake it up and then give my face a couple of sprays. So I usually do like 2 to 3 sprays. For foundation, I'm going to be using the new Estee Lauder Double Wear To Go foundation, and I did talk about this in my last video, which was my October favorites. I was very skeptical because I personally am not a fan of the original Double Wear foundations. This one, however, they finally created for drier skin types. It's very smoothing, very luminous, very glowy. So it comes in a compact container with a little button that you press to dispense the product. So you push it, and it squirts some product out of there. That was a really gross way to describe it. I'm so sorry. So the brush that I like to use most often is the Sigma Round Kabuki F82. This is rounded but flat. It's very dense, so it gives you quite a lot of coverage. You can use pretty much any type of foundation brush. Just keep in mind if you are dry or textured, try to avoid buffing or swirling motions because like with your fingers, that will cause microexfoliation, which will accentuate patchiness or dry flake. So I'm going to use soft pressing motions, not wiping or circular, but just pressing it into the skin. And then I'm going to take a Real Technique sponge. This has been dampened already. Make sure that you rinse it and then really squeeze out the excess water. So I like to use very gentle pressing and dabbing motions to blend this into my skin. I like to work in thin layers at a time just because this helps avoid the makeup looking cakey or heavy or patchy. This foundation blends out really nicely and it really doesn't take a lot to blend it out like some others do. You can get medium buildable coverage with this. I just find when you're layering, it can start to then look a little patchy. It does a pretty good job of covering most of what I want it to with just one layer, and then I can go in with concealer just to kind of hide any further imperfections that might be showing through. For concealer, I do often think it's necessary to use 2 different textured formulas. If you're trying to conceal pitted scars or like pigmentation blemishes, you will need something firmer and stiffer just to really kind of help fill it or cover it and last a long time. For under the eyes, I do not think that particular type of a formula is the best, especially if, like me, you are very dry. So for the under eyes, I need something much more smoothing, hydrating, and creamy. If you try to put a very smooth, creamy, or illuminating concealer on a blemish or scar, it will not work well for you. It will accentuate it or it'll slip and slide around. It's just not a good situation. A cheaper alternative for a concealer that I do also think is incredible is the Maybelline Master Conceal. This one is phenomenal. It is a medium to full coverage concealer. This one you can use under the eyes, but personally it's a little bit too dry for me. I will take a little bit of this with my fingers and smooth it over any areas that I have pitted scarring. This just helps kind of smooth the look and almost kind of like fill it in. So I like to take it just on the area, smooth it back and forth so that it fills in that little ridge, and lightly start diffusing it out. Now, if you have deep pitted scarring like I do, nothing is going to completely cover it or make it invisible. It's not a wall, like you can't just spackle over it and then paint. It doesn't work that way. But this technique will help minimize the appearance of the scar. And then I will go in with a concealer brush, of course making sure it is clean to avoid spreading bacteria. And then with that concealer brush, I will use the same concealer to conceal any like hyperpigmentation or red spots that I have. And then going in with the beauty blender, I'm just going to lightly press over to make sure any concealer is blended into the skin. With this, I'm going mostly around the area, not right on top, because I don't want to remove remove the concealer I put on, just make sure it's blended. Okay, now it's time to do something about these bad boys. I have very bad dark circles. I've always had bad dark circles. It's hereditary, but it's also just because I've never really been able to sleep properly. And also because my eyes are more deep set, this area here looks further accentuated. So one of the products that I have been obsessed with for helping to camouflage my dark circles is the NYX Dark Circle Concealer. While it's called a concealer, I do not personally think it works the best as a concealer on its own. I think it's incredible for counteracting or camouflaging the dark pigment. It's a very smooth, creamy, hydrating texture, and it is infused with coconut oil. So I use the shade number 3 because it is very peach tone, so it really helps counteract that dark pigment. I just take a little bit with my finger and just put this on the area where the dark circle is. And if it looks a little too peachy or pink initially, that's okay because we are going to go over top with actual concealer. I love the Maybelline Instant Age Rewind. I know everyone raves about this. I like to bring it down and up this way. And then warm it in with my finger and I'll blend it out with a sponge lightly. I also like to bring the concealer up here just to lift the eye area. I do like to set it with a light powder almost immediately, but I mean, you need to understand if you are very, very dry, unless you're using a concealer that is like glue, which looks really bad on dry skin anyways, concealer will move around a tiny bit. That's what happens when makeup is put on skin. It is never going to be 100% perfect. To set that under eye concealer, I'm going to use the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette. This one's more of a pale, kind of like neutrally pink, and this is more of a yellow. This is a Real Techniques brush from it was like the metal something collection. I like to use it for setting my under eyes. And I just lightly press it. For this area here, this step is definitely optional, but just to kind of further set and diffuse while adding a bit of a glow, I like to use the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Palette with the MAC 137 brush. And I just like to lightly sweep the first 2 colors and do a quick sweep of this right under here. And I also will bring a tiny bit down the bridge of my nose. Now my nose is still very swollen, so I don't want to accentuate it too much, but I love how a highlighted nose looks, so I will do it anyways. When it comes to powder, putting powder on very dry or textured skin often will accentuate it. There are a couple of powders that I do like to use. However, I don't like to set my entire face with powder. But if you are applying blush or contour, sometimes when you're blending over top of liquid foundation that isn't a mattifying texture, it can really move the product and make it look patchy and uneven. So I do like to set just this area here and a little bit where I might get a tiny bit shiny throughout the day. One that I do really love to use is the MAC Mineralize Skinfinish Natural, and this is in the shade Medium. It's a very lightweight powder. It's great for setting, great for adding a tiny bit of coverage. If you are more oily or normal, you can definitely use this on its own for a lightweight powder foundation. Of course, us dry girls doesn't work for. But what I like to do with this is I will take this gigantic Tarte Airbrush foundation brush. Even though this is for foundation, I kind of prefer it for powder. And I'll just take a tiny bit of product, push this right into the area that I want to set. Down my nose and my forehead. I'm not going to bring it all over because I don't want to mattify my face. So for contour, again, I'm going to go in with that Kat Von D Shade and Light palette, and I'm going to be using the MAC 161 brush. Because it's curved, it really helps sculpt the natural shape of the cheekbone, and it pretty much does all the work for you. And I am using the lighter, cooler tone shade, but I like to take it to the hollow of my cheek and blend up towards the top of my ear. That's where the hollow of my cheek would naturally fall. I just smooth this down the sides and really focusing on the tip. And then I will go over top with the powder brush from Tarte just to blend that out. For a highlight, I am of course going to use the new Becca Jaclyn Hill Champagne Glow palette. So I am going to use this obnoxiously large fan brush, and I'm just going to take Pearl and Champagne Pop, mostly Pearl, but just a tiny bit of Champagne Pop. And I'm going to apply this to the high points of my cheek. For blush, I'm going to be using this Clinique Cheek Pop blush in the shade 13 Rosy Pop, and I'm using the Real Techniques blush brush to apply this. Final step, of course, would be some MAC Fix Plus. This product is not a makeup setting spray per se, it is more of a finishing mist to absorb any excess powder or product and just make your makeup look like it kind of blends in together a little bit better. So that pretty much completes my foundation face routine. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.